How easy it is to manage a state in React application? I think it's easy, right? You can always do with useState, and it is very easy to get started with. But when things get complex, you have to think about alternative. Are you going to think about other state management library like Redux or anything else? But before that, the React hook provide you something called useReducer. Hey, this is Tapas, and today in this video I am going to teach you how to use useReducer hook for better state management. If you have not learned about useState yet, I highly recommend that you go back and start learning about useState. But if you know about useState, you will be able to catch up with useReducer very early, and I'm sure that you are going to learn a lot from this video. If you have any questions, any queries after going through this video, please feel free to put that into the comment section of this YouTube channel. I'm going to get back to you. Or I'm also available on Twitter. This is my handle, so you can go ahead and check out, and you can DM me. I'm going to respond to you, or you can catch me on LinkedIn as well. Okay, so without any further delay, let us now get started with useReducer video. But before that, I would like to request you to subscribe to my channel, because I keep sharing lot of knowledge, lot of things that can benefit you. All right, so let's get started. So let us learn about useReducer with an example. The example I have prepared for all of you is called my bucket list. What we can do in this example is like you can add like what you want to do. For example, I want to do traveling, and by say 2nd of December I'll make a wish. So you can make a wish, and once the thing is done, you can just check it out that the wish is done. Let's add a few more, maybe eating, and that's what I'm going to do definitely by today. And then maybe reading book, another one that I want to do maybe sometime by say 5th. So I'm making 3 wishes. Now what we can do is like, if one of the thing is over, one of the wish is over, I'm just going to knock this out. This wish is done. If I think that some of the wish is cancelled, what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete them permanently. So this is what basically my bucket list is, where I can keep adding the wishes, can tick like whether the wish is fulfilled or delete the wish. So this is the app that we are going to talk about. But in this app, what we're going to do first, we are going to first see how this application can be built with plain useState React hook. Friends, we have already discussed about useState before, so you know about useState. But if you are new to useState, I would highly recommend that you go to the useState video and just do a brush up and then come back to this video. The link is there in the description of this video. So let's see first with useState how to build this. Understand the problem that we might face with useState, and then after that, what we're going to do, we are going to rebuild this one with useReducer, and that is when we will be able to kind of appreciate like why useReducer in certain circumstances is much better than useState. All right, so let's start with code. First with useState, let's build my bucket list. All right, so we have VS Code open, and I have the project over here, important the VS Code, which we are going to go through, and we're going to learn like how this my bucket list app is built using the useState for state management. So I have this app.jsx file where we see that we import a component called bucket list. And what I'm going to do, I'm straight away going to go inside this bucket list component. All right. So in the bucket list component, let's go to the import very quickly. We import useState from React because this is what we're going to use for state management. And there are two imports actually for libraries. For example, I want to use unique ID. So I have used UUID from React UUID. You can use anything else. And I'm using 2 icons. One is for tick, another is for trash. That's what you saw just now when I've added the wish. Tick and trash icon from the React icons. All right. Next thing we're going to do is like we're going to go to the JSX part and trying to understand how this entire thing has built. All right. So first thing that we're seeing is a header, which is nothing but this particular header, my bucket list. So if I go to the header at the top, it says is a header, my bucket list. Inside that there is a H1, which you can see over here. Okay. Now after the header, there is a div. Over here in the div, there is a ULLI element and there is another div. So let's go to this particular div first. This particular div, let me just expand a bit so that you can see it. What you see over here, it says I want to, then one input type text box, then one input type date, and then is a button. So I want to, one input type text, by input type date, and then is a button. And you can see like when I click on the button, I am calling a function called add wish, and for both this input, when there is some value changes inside those input boxes, be it text box or the date, I am actually handling the input value, calling handle wish, a handle wish function. We are going to see in a bit. Okay, now so this is handled like whatever I am adding something like say traveling, and I'm giving a date over here. So my handle wish got called whenever I change this value and change this value. Something happened when you call this. We'll see what happened. And when I click on this make wish, this thing gets added over here, right? So it means this add wish is going to take the value from this and going to add somewhere, add into some array or things like that, some kind of collection. Okay, so once I keep adding to the collection, which is nothing but this particular state. Okay, we're going to see that. Now what we're going to do here is like we are iterating through this state. Iterating means just like for loop, we are going to do this state, taking each of the item, and then we are forming this particular representation. Okay, so first thing is like we are telling item.title, which is nothing but this traveling, is due by, you can see is due by, right? Then item.by is nothing but this date. Then you have this tick icon, and then you have this trash icon. And when I click on this tick icon, on click, I am calling a method called mark done. And then when I click on this trash icon, I am calling a method called delete wish. As simple as that. I hope that explanation is great and you can understand this one. Now, in case you don't understand this explanation better, I want you to go through the useState video and just start looking into it so that you will understand it better. Alright, so next what we're going to do is like how the state management happen. So what we are doing over here, we are actually managing a couple of states using useState. You know what useState is? It's a React's default hook. React provides it out of the box, through which you can actually tell what is the initial state value, and it returns two things. One is the current state value and a method to update the state, right? So that's what the useState is. So we are using one useState for this entire list of wishes, means all. So I have given traveling, and if I see eat, and let's say eat by maybe this, make a wish. So it is going to add each of this item, right, into an array. So for that, I have to manage a state so that I can change it, I can tweak it, whatever I want to do. So this is the one, and you see that I'm initializing with an array. And the next thing is each of this row, basically whatever I am adding, my wish has actually two elements. One is the wish name, which we call title, and wish by when I want to fulfill it, I say by. And so these two things I need to capture somewhere, right, as an internal value of this component. That's why we have this useState. So title and by is there. So this is the wish. All right. So next, whenever I'm typing something over here, right, what I'm doing like handle wish. What exactly handle wish means? I am getting from this input variable, I am getting the input variable, like for which input variable I am typing, that is coming from e.target.name. And the value of whatever I am typing, that is e.target.value. Then what I am doing, I am just using the update state function of wish and updating the actual state value. So now the current state value will become the updated state value. Here I am using object destructuring. So if you are new to object destructuring, I would suggest that you go back and start reading about object destructuring. I have also created a video where I show like all aspects of object destructuring. You can just go ahead and start looking into it. The link is also in the description of this video. Great. So this particular line is going to update this wish state's title with whatever we are typing here, the date, the by, like whatever we are typing here, it is going to update everything over here. So that is great. So wishes got updated for me as soon as I have typed. Now whenever I'm clicking on make a wish, what exactly happened? Let's see. So the make a wish actually call a function called add wish, and if I go to add wish, is going to take the state value of the wish that we have just updated, and then what it does basically, it adds to the state array. Right, the state array that we are managing at the top. Again, we are using an array destructuring here, so mindful about it. So that's how we are updating the state. Similarly, if I'm doing a mark done, when I'm clicking on this one, what I'm going to do is like I'm going to change the style of this particular row and adding a strike through kind of stuff. So what I can do basically, I am going to just mark it as done in a way. So let's go ahead and check that. So mark done, let's go to mark done. What it is doing, it is actually trying to find out what is that wish from the bucket I am marking as done, and once it find it out as index, it's retrieved this one, and there is a property called is done of that particular state, and in the is done, what is doing basically, it is just marking it as true. So we are adding a property called is done and marking it as true. So when we are marking as true, looking into is done, what we are doing, we are adding a text decoration called line through, which will be like a strike through line on this particular item, on this particular text. That's what we are doing. And last thing is about when you're clicking on delete, what we are going to do is basically we are going to remove it, delete wish, going to remove it basically from the state, the array, and then update the state again. So this is what is happening with useState. This is how we are handling with useState. Now, this is great, it works, but we have to understand that there are few problems. So why we will be going to useReducer, and we are going to understand this one, like how useReducer is going to help. The first problem over here is the predictability of a state update. If you can see, the state gets updated from multiple places. One is when you type here, when you type here, when you click on this button, when you click on this one, when you click on this one, from multiple places we are updating the state. Now all the state updates doesn't happen, all the state update logic doesn't happen from one place. The state update logic basically spreaded across multiple functions. One is like delete wish, mark done, add wish, handle wish. There are multiple functions where this is kind of spreaded, which is little bit messy. Why? Because once you have to write a test for your, like how your state changes, like your test case, unit test case for how your state changes, you have to write. It's not that great way of writing and handling that. And predictability also, like you don't know sometimes like where exactly it is changing. So when you're debugging, when the application getting a little bit more larger, and when you are debugging this one, you have to put the debug point in multiple places and try to find out like what exactly changing the state if there is a problem. So that is one problem. And another problem, I told about testability also, and another problem is your all state manipulation, state change logic is very much within the component, and that is making the component really fat. So your component should have ideally the component logic, which is already we have in the JSX, and a very minimalistic state declaration and things like that. But your state changes, how the things will change and things like that should be separated out somewhere separately, so that you can test that in isolation. It can be actually a separate duty that your code is performing, which is outside of your component code. So that portion is missing. And the last point, which is very important, is like if you see here, our state changes in a way that the previous state change value is actually we are taking for the new state and trying to act on something. For example, I am adding a wish, make a wish. On top of that, I can do a strike through. Then I am going to delete. So three step, right? I added it, I have made a strike through, and I have deleted. So this means now the action that I am going to take on a state, the particular instance, the current state, is actually the output of an action just now happened before. So it means there is a simultaneous action that can happen on your state, and that actually manipulate your state. So in this particular case, also it is a bit difficult for you to kind of track down like how the state changes happen. Now for all this problem that we spoke about, we can actually tackle it in a much better way when we take the useReducer hook into account, when you use that. So in the next version, what we are going to do is like we are going to understand what useReducer hook is and how it is going to solve the problem, the 3-4 problems just now we spoke about. Can you see that? We'll see that. But before that, I want to get into the anatomy of useReducer hook, going to understand how the syntax is, what each of this thing is, and there will be few jargons that we'll be using. I have covered those in the Redux video before, but if you have not seen the Redux video and coming here directly, don't worry, I am going to cover them again for you so that you understand it completely. Then we'll come back to the code and try to understand. Alright, so let's get into that. Now we'll be seeing the anatomy of useReducer hook. It's a hook provided by React by default. It is there for better state management. But what we're going to understand is the syntax in details first. Then we'll see like underlying how does it work. Okay. So if I break the syntax into parts, there will be 6 parts basically, which you are going to see one by one. The first part, the useReducer hook itself, what exactly it does? It's an alternative to useState used for better state management, which you're going to see. Then this useState hook takes 2 parameters. One is reducer, another is initial state. Actually, it takes another optional parameter also. We'll talk about it later. Now the reducer is what is basically, it's a plain JavaScript function that holds the state change logic. So if you've seen with useState, our state change logic was completely spread inside the component. But what useReducer hooks forces us? useReducer hooks forces us to take all the state change logic into one function or in one file. That is what we're calling as reducer. Okay, the concept, the term reducer is coming from the concept of reducing something. It means that it takes an input and act on it to produce an output that you actually looking for, your logic, right? We have reduce function, reduce method on Java array, if you are aware of. Okay, there is map reduce also. If somebody worked with big data before, they understand. So this is what reducer, plain JavaScript function. Then the next thing that we want to see about the initial state is the initial state value. We have seen in the useState case also, it used to take an initial state value. Then we'll go to the left side of it. In the left side, we'll talk about dispatch. The dispatch is a function, it's a method that tells the reducer what to do. So somebody has to tell the reducer what action to perform. That is what dispatch method does. And the last thing is the state, which is nothing but the current state value that useReducer actually returns, and you all know what const is, so I'm not going for that explanation. So seeing things overall, useReducer is a hook that takes the initial state value and a function which will be called when dispatching an action and tell this user what kind of action to be performed. After the action gets performed, a current value of state will be returned that will be actually using in our application. I hope this explanation is understood. Now what we're going to do is like I'm going to take you to some sketches and trying to feed these things into different parts, the state, dispatch, reducer and all these things together, so that you understand what is the difference between useState and useReducer in terms of conceptualization. Okay, so let's see that. Okay, let us first try to understand with this interactive diagram like how the useState thing works. Okay, so assume that this is a component and then we have a state. This is a state, assume. Okay, so we call it a state, and then let's take maybe a button over here. So let's say this is a button. We say click me, and let's put some interactions that somebody clicks, and then what happens when somebody clicks, basically it actually creates an event. So there will be an event over here, and this particular event we can call as click event, and this click event, what is going to do, we call it as click event, is going to make some changes to the state. So we'll say that there is something called update state. This is maybe a function or set state thing. So what will happen is basically it's going to update this one back, right? So this is what is going to happen. So it will update the state, it will update the state back. So I can also take this as an arrow basically. So I'll take this as an arrow. Yeah. So it's update function and update the state back. Now instead of click me, if what happened is like, let's take like maybe there is another combo box, a list box come over here. So there is a drop down box. Okay. So let's take it as a drop down. And if there is a action happened over here, right? Again, so for example, it takes another action over here, another event. So another event, in this case maybe a select event. It is going to change the state again the state update happened and the state update happened. So over here, what you can see over here is like there is a component, and inside the component only we are managing the entire state update logic in a different places. In this case, this update happened, the update logic from the click me, there could be another update logic that happened from drop down, so that kind of thing that we are actually talking about. But when we are thinking about useReducer, and as we know that there is a dispatch function, there is a reducer function, let's see like how this thing are coming to action. Okay, so we are going to do like same component over here, same, this is a component diagram, and then we are going to take a state over here. So let's draw a state and maybe the similar rectangle to say click me. Okay, now say somebody clicks, what exactly going to happen? Now of course there will be an event. Now this event is not going to change the state directly, so that's the first thing that we need to understand. Okay, so this is what I am going to say not going to happen. Instead of that, what is going to happen basically, it will dispatch an action. Okay, we'll call it as dispatch an action. So let's draw it this way. Say we'll call it like dispatch action. Who dispatch the action? This particular event is dispatching this action, and once the action is dispatched, the next thing will happen is like the reducer will be called. Okay, you know what reducer is? The reducer is where all the logic there, it's all logic. This, remember, is logic, no magic. Basically there is nothing magic, so it's a simple logic. What exactly this logic about? It's basically whatever the actions the dispatch is actually dispatching, the event is dispatching, based on that action reducer is going to perform certain things. So dispatch, there is an arrow that is required, will be coming to sending an action, and the reducer will be called, and the reducer will compute based on the action the dispatcher is dispatching. It will perform some action, it will change the state, and then it will make an update of your component state. So in this case, if you see what is happening, all your state computation is going outside of your component. In case of useState, all the state computation is inside the component, making the component anyway bigger. In this case, it is going outside of the component. Reducer is an isolated JavaScript function, or could be a separate JavaScript file itself where this function is there, which you can separately test it out. If there is a debugging challenge that how the state is going to get changes, you can actually focus only on one file, only one place, what is exactly happening. This dispatcher, when you see in the code, you will see it actually driven by action. So it means we define, hey, if this is like add a wish, you go to reducer and do this. If it is like delete a wish, you go to reducer only do this, right? So this add a wish, delete a wish, all this kind of actions that will be dispatched by the dispatcher, and based on those actions the logic of the reducer will be kicked off, and that logic is going to change the state, and then the state updates happen in the component. So this is the biggest advantage, I would say, on top of useState. In useReducer, you isolate the things, you make things much better, you don't have your state logic inside your component, and also it's much predictable, like who is doing the change, based on which action the change is happening. I hope you understood this particular diagram. Now what we're going to do, we are going to straight down to the code and try to see with useReducer how we have achieved this in the code and what kind of challenges that we have tackled. All right, so let's see that. Alright, so now I'm running the same bucket list, but this time with the useReducer hook, and we are going to get into the code and try to understand. So in the app.jsx file, now I am actually importing bucket list with reducer instead of bucket list, the JSX file that we have seen before. So bucket list with reducer is again a React component, and we are going to go through it. So first thing is like it is now importing useReducer, and if you see there is no trace of useState at all, right? We have removed useState at all completely, and again those two icons as before. And here what we are doing here is basically importing couple of things from a file called bucket list reducers, which we are going to pay attention to and going to see in a bit. All right, let's jump into our JSX. Almost same as what you have seen. There is a header. This is my bucket list header, and if I go inside the header, my bucket list, and there is a h2, this is what is coming over here. And then again a div, inside that there is a ul, and there is a div again, in this div, what we have is here, we have a date and we have a wish button and we have a text, same, exactly the same thing. And then at the top, we are iterating through the state, all the wishes, and then putting them into much more readable fashion so that they actually render over here whenever there is a wish get added. Exactly same thing. But there is a difference. There is a difference is we are now dealing with useReducer. We have removed useState completely. So let's try to understand how we are using useReducer. So first thing we are doing is useReducer. If you remember the anatomy, this is an alternative of useState, which takes two parameters. One parameter is a reducer, which is nothing but a bunch of logic lying somewhere for the state change and return the change state. And second is the initial value of the state. So in this case, the initial value of the state is an empty array, and we have certain thing called BL-reducer, which we are actually importing from here. It has a logic. The logic does all the state computation, but based on what it does the state computation. That's why the dispatch function, the dispatch method comes into picture. Who gives us dispatch method? The useReducer hook returns a dispatch method. So it means this particular instance of useReducer, which is having a reducer, knows this is my dispatch. Okay, and also this dispatch, when it is doing its work, it knows this is my reducer. Okay, so that connection is already established. Similarly, if I see this one, for this one, the reducer is this one, the initial state value is this particular object, it returns a dispatch method. Now if you see, like, there is a dispatch method, right? Now I cannot have two dispatch method in the same file. It's going to give me some kind of struggle, right? The same name in the same scope. So that's the reason I have renamed it called dispatch form action. You can give any name basically. All right. So that is the advantage of if you are doing an array destructuring. You don't have to use explicit aliases as you do with the object destructuring. You can just use the name that you want, that will create a variable with that particular name. Okay, and another thing is that this is the current state value, this is the current state value that it returns. So this is how the useReducer is. Now how everything gets connected, right? So whenever there is a click happen, for example, I click on make a wish, or after making a wish over here, let's add something, I am striking it through all these actions that I'm going to do. Definitely the way that it used to happen before is the same way it happens. So in this case also there is a button. On the button there is an on click, but instead of directly doing a set state, directly changing the state, with the set state, what we are going to do is basically we are dispatching an action. Okay, we are dispatching an action. What exactly dispatching action mean? We are telling that, hey, reducer. Now you remember we told that this particular dispatch knows who is this reducer, the BL-reducer. Okay, because it's coming from this particular useReducer instance. So we are saying here, hey reducer, hey BL-reducer, I want to add a wish, and the wish is this. So if you take a moment to look into this dispatch, what exactly the argument it takes an object. The object says like what kind of action it is, and along with that there is something called a payload, means while performing the action, do you want your action to look into some extra information and then perform the action, or with that you want to perform the action. So in this case we are saying that hey reducer, I want to add a wish, and this is the wish I am going to add. Now what is going to do, this guy is going to get into this particular reducer, which is called BL-reducer, which I am going directly now BL-reducer, which is inside this bucket reducer.js, from where I have imported it, right? BL-reducer. And if you see here, it is nothing but a simple JavaScript function, having switch and a bunch of cases. One case is like if it is add wish, then you take this action, extract that wish, which is like payload, and add the new wish. After you add the new wish, you change the state, because state also is another thing that reducer takes. So reducer takes two parameters, one is the state, another is the action. What exactly it happens is basically based on the action, it changes the state, and then it returns a new state value. So it means before this action happened, the state would have been blank, because that's how this particular reducer was initialized. If you remember this blank array, right? There's a blank array, not blank state, exactly blank array state, empty array state. And then in that empty array, it now added one wish and it has returned. The moment it has returned, this guy, this particular state, which is the current value from this useReducer, has that return value. So it means that this state right now has that one entry got added. Now if you click one more time by after adding things, again the same thing happened. useReducer goes over there, it gets this add wish, it does its job and done. If you call the remove wish method by clicking on the trash icon, what will happen? The remove wish will call again, the array will change and the return will be there with that particular thing remove, that particular entry remove. But let's see how this remove wish gets called. So again, through the dispatch, if I go to the thing that on the trash, so the trash, so the on click I'm dispatching with remove wish, and I am telling that this particular item, this particular wish by this ID, go ahead and remove. So in the remove wish, I come over here and I'm finding that element with the ID and I'm just removing it. That's what I'm filtering out, means I'm removing it, right? So that's what I'm doing. Similarly, if you want to done wish, you know that we are making is done as true. So of course I'm saying done wish, and then with this payload I'm doing this. Isn't this great? Because your entire logic for state update it is one file. Okay, this is so if you have to test this file separately because it's a plain JavaScript function, you can test this one in isolation. It has nothing to do with the component. First thing. Second thing, your component is now not bloated because you have taken everything out, all the state manipulation logic outside in a separate module, separate JavaScript file, separate function altogether. Also it is more predictable. So like for add wish this thing got changed, or for remove wish this thing got changed, or for done wish this thing got changed. It is much predictable in that way, all the state changes. So this is why useReducer try to make use of this useReducer over useState wherever it is possible. If one guideline that I can provide is like, if your state is something like you have only one state and that is primitive, like one string, one boolean, or one thing that you are handling, useState is perfectly fine. You don't have to worry about trying anything else. But if your state is little bit complex, your state structure is little bit complex, for example, you are dealing with an object or array an object, things like that, you should make use of useReducer because your state changes are also going to be complex, and this is the way you should manage it. So anybody debugging your code, or you are testing your code, or anybody looking into your code, it is much clear that what exactly happening for the state changes. All right. So I hope you understand. Now, if you see, there is one more reducer like form reducer we spoke about. What is it about? So if you see, like before we have handled this title by, things like that using a useState separately, and that was completely for the handle change. Whenever I was changing anything on the wish title or wish state in this input boxes, I was actually changing it. So now what we'll be doing is like we'll be doing it through reducer. So in this particular section, pay an attention like how to handle a form in React using useReducer. That's what I'm teaching. Okay. So in this case, same I'm calling a handle wish, and in the handle wish, see what I am doing. I am dispatching this form action, which is again coming from another dispatcher method from this particular reducer, for this particular reducer, form reducer, which is having the initial state title and by. So what it does basically, it actually telling this is a type called input text, and the field, okay, the field that I am giving another property called e.target.name, and the payload, the value that I am sending as e.target.value. Basically, in the dispatch action, you can send a type and payload, or you can send anything. In this case, I could have made the payload as another object which is taking this particular name and value. That is completely up to you. But I am sending it separately so that it is as a beginner. If you're a beginner looking into it, it is more clear for you. But what you can also do, the payload can have both name and value as an object. That also you can send. Okay, that is perfectly fine. Now, the moment this dispatch action takes place, it knows its reducer. Its reducer is form reducer. Let's go to form reducer. What form reducer is talking about? Form reducer is saying that if it is an input text, in that case, change the state as this is the name, the field, and this is the field value, so that the state gets changed. So it means that over here, this will be a new title and a new by. right? Just like set state, what we have done, but doing in a different place. Now, why I'm showing that there is another case, because if you have a checkbox or a radio button, and if you want to handle that toggle on that case you can actually, it's a toggle, right? You checked, unchecked kind of thing, that you can actually handle it separately. So for that, it won't be field, it will be whatever the payload, like is done, making it not is done, that kind of stuff, that you can actually handle it in a checkbox kind of thing. So that is why for form, when you are using useReducer, based on what is the type of the input elements in the form, you can handle all the state changes into your reducer function. Again, this reducer function is isolated. You can test it separately. It is not inside your component. So you are actually saving lot of bloating of your component and things like that. So hope this is clear, like why useReducer is useful. Now, before we end, I'm just going to repeat those 3-4 things, the advantages. The first advantage, you are isolating your state change logic from your component to a separate file. First thing. Second thing, it is going to give you better testability because it is in the separate file, so you can test it in isolation. You don't have to do anything with your component. Third, if there is a state change which is depending on the previous state value, this is what is required where you should be using useReducer, and this is the way you have more predictability, like for which action exactly the state is changing, so you have a better predictability. Even you can log all these things, the predictability. And so if your state is a simple primitive stuff, like you have a single boolean string, integer kind of thing, number kind of thing, then you can use useState. But if it is a complex structure like object, array of objects, highly recommended you use useReducer. I hope you found this one really useful, and from now you will be using useReducer. So people, I hope you found it useful. So what you can do is, like the code that we have seen, it is there in the GitHub, and the link of the code is there in the description of this particular video. You can go ahead and start looking into it. What I want you to do as a practice, and I'm really serious about it, if you're following this and you want to learn about it, please do the practice. Practice makes thing one stage advance, if not perfect. Okay, so take the same code and try to add one more functionality, the functionality of editing a wish. For example, you have made a wish and you think that by that particular date you cannot make that wish, and you want to just update the date field, or you have made a typo on your wish and you want to just update it. Please go ahead and implement the update feature of a wish with the useReducer way, not with the useState way. And if you have done this, please submit your code. I'll make sure that I'm going to review it. I'm going to give you feedback so that you learn it better. All right. So hope this particular video was useful. I'm looking for your comment. Please comment. Please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel if you have not done already. And I'm doing things for developer community by sharing my knowledge. You can help me by sharing this video with your circle so that others also come to know and they get benefit about it. So up next, we'll be coming up with another React logic and another React way of doing things. Until then, take a great care of yourself and see you next.